So let's do a preview of the first ever quantum algorithm, which was the Deutsch algorithm or Deutsch-Jozsa algorithm from 1992. And the problem that they considered, which I'll call the Deutsch-Jozsa problem, is the following. Given a single bit function, so a function f, inputting a single bit, either 0 or 1, and outputting a single bit, we want to determine if f of 0 is equal to f of 1 by what we're going to call querying the function, querying the function f. Okay? So what does it mean to query a function? It just means evaluate it. So think of it as asking a question to the function. We treat it as a black box. So let me input a single bit z, either in 0 or 1. And think about it as asking a question to the function, querying the function. We don't know what it is, but we're allowed to ask a question to the function. We're allowed to provide some input and get out the corresponding output. So this is a query, and I'm going to differentiate it. I'm going to call it a classical query for reasons that will become clear shortly. So what is the classical query complexity of this? How many questions would you have to ask this function in order to solve this problem? Remember, we want to determine if f of 0 is equal to f of 1, some unknown function f. The only thing you're allowed to do is make queries. How many queries do you have to make to solve this problem? Anyone?
1.
Just 1, okay. Other ideas?
2.
2? Why 2?
So you can get f of 0 and f of 1 and compare them?
Exactly right. If I just do it with 1, I would know either f of 0 or f of 1. Wouldn't tell me enough information I need. So I'm going to have to make at least 2 queries. Right? These are sort of totally independent. So the classical query complexity of this problem is 2. Now I'm going to ask you, what do you think, what is the quantum query complexity? Any guesses?
1.
1, yes. There's a joke, I wouldn't be telling you about it if it wasn't lower. It can't be 0. It has to be an integer. So it's going to be 1 here. How is it 1? Let's see how this works. Here's the notation that we're going to use to describe quantum algorithms. I'm going to have an initial state, and we're going to use this funny looking notation, which we'll call ket notation, or also Dirac notation. So this is a ket. The label on the inside tells me what the state is. Just like with bits, qubits can have 2 basis states, and by analogy, we label them 0 and 1. Okay? So by convention, we start in the 0 state. We could have equally well started in the 1 state, but it's just a convention. We start in the 0 state, usually the lower energy state of the system. Then we draw lines. Time is going to flow from left to right. And just like in classical circuits, we draw symbols. But the only thing is in quantum, we're a lot less creative. So in classical circuits, you have all these cool symbols for like and or and not. In quantum, we just do a box, and we put a letter in the box. So and in some ways, it's good. It's easier to remember, but it's less visual than the classical circuits. So the first operation, which I'm going to introduce, is going to be the Hadamard operation, or Hadamard gate, box with an H in it. I'll define what this does, and you're going to come to know and love it in the course. And then I'm going to do a query. So I'm going to label that as Q sub f. Then I'm going to do another Hadamard operation. And then I'm going to do a measurement. Okay, the exception to the boring symbols is that the measurement, for whatever reason, we put a speedometer-like symbol in there. So this denotes a measurement. Measurement is the bridge between the quantum and the classical world. It's how you get information out of the quantum computer. And you'll notice I'm using 1 line to denote quantum information. And then after we measure, I'm going to have a bit of information. So we'll use 2 lines to distinguish when we have classical information versus quantum information. Okay, we're going to do a query that's essentially like this, but the only difference is going to be with a quantum query, it's going to have to be reversible. Quantum mechanics is reversible, so we're going to have to do this reversibly. The function f, could be a constant function that's equal to 0 in all cases. Okay? If that's true, then it wouldn't be reversible. I wouldn't be able to determine uniquely what the input is given the output. So the trick, here it is, I'll actually write it down, that we use to make this reversible is that whatever the input qubit is now, z, I'm going to require another ancilla bit, which I'll write as a. Ancilla just means like an extra bit that we're using, sort of like a workspace. And what we're going to do is the quantum query, q sub f acting on this, is going to do, it's going to keep around the input z, and then it's going to do a plus f of z, plus with a circle, meaning addition modulo 2. Okay? This, we'll see that it's actually completely reversible, and we'll see that it's unitary. So this is an allowable quantum operation. And this we often call a basis query. Basis query. There's a completely equivalent formulation which we'll use to analyze this, which is known as a phase query, which is where we do something that doesn't even make sense in classical computing. I write the information about the function into the phase, for now just think about it as positive or negative, into the phase of the register of the qubit. Okay? There's really no analog for this. You can think about probabilistic computing where you have positive numbers between 0 and 1. But famously in quantum mechanics and quantum computing, we're allowed to have negative numbers. We're even allowed to have complex numbers. So this we'll come to know as a phase. And we don't have enough time to analyze the algorithm, so I'm going to leave it here today. But if you're interested, try reading chapter 1 of the book, or finish reading it. Hopefully you already started. And see if you could work through the math of this. It'll be a good refresher for the linear algebra that we'll start off with next time.